This episode is brought to you by the Cornell Executive MBA MS in Healthcare Leadership, in partnership with the Weill Cornell Graduate School of Medical Sciences. The future of healthcare needs motivated and business-minded leaders who are equipped to facilitate change from within their organization and throughout the industry at large. Offered on the weekend in New York City, the Cornell Executive MBA MS in Healthcare Leadership is the only dual degree of its kind, combining business breadth and healthcare depth with world-class faculty instruction and an unmatched alumni network. Take the next step towards driving innovation in the healthcare industry by connecting with their admissions team. Search Cornell EMBA-MS to start your journey. Maricella, you and I have had the great honor of hosting some Ellevate roundtables lately. Can you tell me more about your roundtable?
Sure. I've been hosting the Managers Roundtable, which we get together every Thursday at 12 p.m. Eastern to talk for an hour. It's about 15 minutes of a guest expert talking about a certain topic. So everything about how to address performance issues with your team, or how to talk compensation with your team as a manager, or even how to build more authentic workplace within your team structure. And then we go into breakout rooms where people can ask questions and have conversations. So it's a really great place for all of us who we want to be managers that are building inclusive places. We want to be good at being there for our teams. And sometimes you can't really just Google you can Google how to be a good manager, but there are questions you might have that you can't really just find online. The best way to really get answers is to talk it through with others who might be in similar situations. So that's what we do at the Managers Roundtable. They're a lot of fun.
Maricella, that sounds amazing. And for any of our listeners who are managers of teams or want to become a manager and start having these important conversations, we invite you to check it out. Go to ellevatenetwork.com, where you'll find a list of all of our roundtables, including managers, those in career transition, executives, and rising leaders. And if you use the code ELLEVATEPOD, you'll get 50% off the cost of attending. So check it out now, and we'd love to hear your thoughts.
Welcome to the Ellevate podcast, conversations with women changing the face of business. And now your hosts, Kristy, Wallace, and Maricella, Herrera.
Hello and welcome to the Ellevate podcast. This is your host, Kristy Wallace, with my co-host, Maricella Herrera. Hey, Maricella.
Hello.
Hello. My guest today, Anne Huntington. You probably know her company, her family's business. She's president of Huntington Learning Center. And our conversation is so relevant because we talk a lot about the foundation of Huntington is supporting students and education and skills building, but definitely how they pivoted during the pandemic, creating online solutions, supporting their franchises, and really supporting their communities and the families that surround them with how we can bridge some of the learning gaps and impacts that have happened during COVID-19 and the disruption to learning within our communities. So the conversation today with Anne is definitely one that's chock full of things that are personally top of mind to me as a parent of three, and how we best ensure that our children have that type of support that they need.
Very cool. Looking forward to hearing it.
And how's everything going with you? I know you've been traveling quite a bit lately, and glad to have you back with us.
Yeah, I like traveling. I also like coming home.
Well, we're glad to have you back. We've missed you, even though I only see you like a day a week or something, but at least it's better than nothing.
Yeah,
I'll take it.
I'll take it too. It's nice to be able to go to the office for a day, at least, so we can get to catch up with everyone in person.
All right, well, let's get to my conversation with Anne. And thank you so much for joining us today on the Ellevate podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Kristy.
I'm very excited to get into learning about your organization, Huntington Learning Center, which I think many of our listeners, myself included, have seen all over the place. I know you have 300 locations nationwide. But before we get to that, I want to learn more about you. This podcast is all about sharing stories and journeys. We know that there's not one right way to do anything, but I'd love to hear your story. And if you wouldn't mind sharing how you got to where you are today with our listeners.
Excellent. And storytelling is such a great way to share lessons learned and share advice, what not to do, what to do. So again, thank you for having me today. I'm Ann Huntington Sharma. I'm the president of Huntington Learning Center. So how did I get to where I am today? Well, I woke up this morning, which was a really good thing. So I took the traditional route, went to school, went to college. After college, traveled a bit, and then started in the art world. I worked at an auction house for several years. While there, the Great Recession of 08, 09 occurred, and I saw that there were a lot of empty spaces in and around New York City because of the recession. So I started a curatorial company that did pop-up shows throughout New York and other places. So I started with my first company in 2010 and then produced and curated over 30 shows. Like anything, that business evolved, and I started doing fundraising and working with nonprofits and raised over $30 million for different nonprofits, which are near and dear to me. While I was doing that, I spoke with my parents, who had founded a company in 1977 called Huntington Learning Center. And they said, look, we're going through a rebranding. Are you interested in coming on board as a consultant? And I said, well, you know what? This is very interesting. I would love to take what I've learned in business and art, and also having an idea, making it a reality, bring this to the table for Huntington. So started first as a consultant, and anything I do, I dive really, really deep. And so that part-time consulting became full-time, went through the whole training, really understood what we did from the business level. I was a student at Huntington when I was growing up, so I also have that student element of it. And then from there, over the past 8 or so years, I've worked my way to president, and now I lead the company, which, as you shared, is about 300 locations across the country. And we're a franchise network. So we're the franchisor. And then folks who want to go into business for themselves, but not by themselves, that's the slogan of franchising, they can join us and open a Huntington in their community. So that's how I got to where I am. Of course, it wasn't always rainbows and unicorns. There are a lot of dips and a lot of turns and pivots, and I'm very proud of where I am and the folks I work with and what we're able to accomplish each and every day.
How has it been? I mean, have you always been inspired by the work that you do? You talked about starting out more in the art world and, going after different opportunities and innovating during, times when the world was changing. But moving into Huntington, I mean, what was that experience like? Did you always have the passion there? Did that grow on you? I know you said I'm not just what is the hair club? Like, I'm not just the president, I'm a member, that you use the service as well. But I would love to hear, about finding purpose in that work.
Sure. And I think purpose is so important. And I think that passion is really important. And in life, you can have personal passions, professional passions, personal purposes, professional purposes. And what I was doing prior to Huntington, I was helping so many organizations, helping so many artists. And then with Huntington, now I get to help students and help families and literally change lives every single day. So the ethos of doing quote unquote good, the ethos of making a positive impact is the same, even though that they are very different industries. And one of the beauties of the art world is that industry, there are a lot of different hats you can wear. So I'm still very active in art, not day to day. Of course, there aren't enough hours in the day. That said, I am still involved. For example, I'm an associate producer on a documentary film that's about to premiere next week at the Hampton Films Festival called The Art of Making It. So I'm still heavily involved in art, just my role has changed. The passion for education is so critical, especially now. I mean, we're in COVID times and the learning loss is just so horrible in terms of a generation of students who have just lost critical time and critical skills. So that passion is there. It's very genuine. It's very much how can we change? How can we help these students? And so I took a lot of that creativity and that entrepreneurial spirit, which I saw firsthand as a child from my parents, and then took that and ran with it by starting my own company prior to Huntington. I took that entrepreneurial spirit into Huntington and started creating new business lines and new areas of opportunity to help more students who we may not have been helping at that current time. So I took the concept of having an idea and then putting it into action. So even though the two industries are very different, the ethos and that purpose and that passion are very similar.
You mentioned that education's always so important, but particularly during the past year and a half with the pandemic, so many massive shifts in where we learn and how we learn, that the work that you do has never been more important. Can you share a bit about your customers and what you're seeing, those experiences and the ways that you've been able to support them?
Sure. That's a really great question, and it's so timely. Prior to the pandemic, we were solely brick and mortar, meaning you could go to an actual Huntington Learning Center in your local neighborhood. With the pandemic and the state mandates, many, if not all of our centers at some point had to close down. So we had to solve that first problem of how can we help students if our physical doors are closed? So really fast, like in a matter of days, we were able to put all of our systems and processes online to ensure that the students, the families could continue at Huntington. And that was a real game changer for our families because that routine, that continuity, when everything else in the world was so uncertain, they could rely on Huntington and trust that Huntington was going to deliver the programs that the families knew that we could deliver. So first, from a business perspective, COVID enabled us to really become an overnight startup. So we were like a 44-year-old startup. And I've said that before, but it's truly what we did. And in terms of the students, so the learning loss, as I touched on a moment ago, and those who are listening who have children or have friends who have children, students are really far behind. That said, we can't give up hope. The school systems are trying really hard. The school systems are partnering with folks such as Huntington to really help promote different types of tutoring options. So our students are K through 12, so kindergarten through 12th grade, and we help students with basic skills. So think reading, writing, math, vocab, and then also test prep. So think SAT, ACT, AP exams, state-specific exams. So how we really ensure that we get results in our results, for example, in 50 hours, students will go up over 2 grade levels in reading and math. So to ground us, 50 hours is about a work week, give or take, depending on how much work you have that week. So within that amount of time, we can completely change the trajectory of that student's academic career. And we can build those skills, confidence, and motivations. How we do it, we start with something called an academic evaluation that pinpoints exactly where the student is. So the parents may think, okay, well, my child is average, getting B's, maybe some B minuses. But then at Huntington, with that academic evaluation, that family might see that the student's actually 2-3 grade levels behind. And then there's a reason why the student isn't top of class, because the student missed a fundamental gap along the way, which happens to all of us, quite frankly. Let's say a dog died, or there was a divorce in the family and a child just shut down for a critical moment in school. That's where we can come in, because we help the student where they're at. And we make sure that it's customized, it's individualized for the student. So we build skills, confidence, and motivation, and we really help students reach their potential in and out of school. And especially with COVID, we're able to get tremendous gains, especially the little children, like think kindergarten, first, second grade, when you're dealing with phonics and reading. You really need to see the teacher, see your fellow students, so we can really make sure that we build up those skills.
As a parent of now a second, third, and seventh graders, I became deeply knowledgeable about phonics and phonics structures, and realized that my own foundation in phonics is not that strong. I mean, as an adult, thinking about glued sounds and all the different terms and learnings, I was Googling a lot of things to try and get caught up on sight words and all that great stuff.
There you have it. And scaffolding. So you've been living it the past year plus, a second, third, and seventh grade. So you saw firsthand.
Yeah. And just huge recognition to our teachers. My sister's a teacher, and when you see so much what goes on trying to teach your own child phonics, and you're like, oh my gosh, someone is teaching them and many others. And it's great. It's great to know that we have resources that we can lean on, that we're a little bit less alone in that journey. How was it for you as a leader of an organization during this time? You mentioned you pivoted, you created online solutions. I'm sure also the online solutions in a franchise model might have been, things you needed to work through, how to best structure that maybe. Like, how did this all take shape for you? What was your experience like as the leader of the organization?
Well, I became president in October 2019, and we had a national convention. And at the end of the convention, everyone put on 3D glasses and said 2020, the vision is clear. And then, 2020 was definitely a roller coaster. That said, with the pandemic and leading the company, leading a network of lots of franchisees, it has been a tremendous experience. One that, we're still technically in COVID, though we're not as reactionary as we were. We had to get things done, and we had to get things done yesterday. So the mantra really was, anything's possible. Make the impossible possible. You're telling me we can't do it? Okay, find a solution by 3 p.m. So it was more of, let's work together. Let's roll up our sleeves. If this isn't going to work, how do we collaborate? How do we make it work? So there was no question or uncertainty in terms of making what we needed to work, because we had families who were relying on us, who are relying on us, and we had franchisees who were relying on us. So we had to do it. And in the beginning of the pandemic, I was working 24/7. I was on the phone with some lawyers and other people, sometimes at 1, 2 a.m. in the morning. So it was a go, and you couldn't stop. Lots of green lights. You just had to keep going. And it's the reason why now we're doing so well, and we came out of it, and we came out of it stronger. And the reason is because of the team, because of the network. We really listened to each other. We collaborated. We were extremely focused on what we needed to get done. And we had very real-time deadlines. So especially in the beginning, okay, 9 to 11, you have to work on X, Y, and Z project. At 11 o'clock, we're going to have a check-in, see where we are. Then from 12 to 2, we're going to do X, Y, and Z. By 3 o'clock, we have to have a solution. So it was it was like an agile, very fast approach in terms of getting things done. And sometimes we got things wrong. And if we did, we fixed it. But the key was communication. And we communicated with the entire system. At the height of the pandemic, I was sending out daily emails to the entire system. So think like 4,000 plus people were getting an email from me at least once a day to go through what are we doing, where are we at. And folks wanted to hear from peers. So folks wanted to hear from fellow franchisees. So we had once a week a Zoom call where we would discuss a topic that was specific to COVID. We created on our online dashboard, we created an area just about COVID. So we really worked together. So leading throughout this time, there was no question that we were going to fail. We had to succeed. We had to succeed because we had to make sure that the students were okay, that we could deliver our programs, our methodology, regardless of what came our way. And it was extremely humbling, yet rewarding experience. One I don't wish upon anyone, but I was able to do it because I have a fantastic team. And together, we were able to really make that impossible possible.
Yeah, I love that story, and I appreciate your honesty there. One thing I had heard so much from other leaders during this time is that, leading during times of uncertainty is hard. I mean, there's a lot of risks. There's a lot of times when you will get it wrong, and many times you'll get it right. And I don't even know if I should say that, right? Because I'm not sure that there's one right way and one wrong way to do anything, right? It's figuring it out the way that works for you. Any other lessons you took away from that time, and how did you feel confident, particularly during times when maybe you really weren't feeling that confident?
Well, the key is we've been doing this, we meaning Huntington, for over 44 years. Our systems are extremely strong. Our methodology works. Now, we didn't start with stone and a chisel. We're not that old, but we were pre-computer age. So we know the systems work. Over the years, we have invested really heavily in technology and infrastructure. And we have a fantastic team, which is the most important. In terms of when there was uncertainty or the confidence level was low, it's important to step away. So it was important for me to feel the grass outside, step on the grass, get grounded a little bit. I had 110% confidence that it was going to work. There was no doubt in me that it wasn't going to work. That said, I'm not a steel type person. I'm not, I am human. So there were moments where, okay, I have to step away. We have to step away. So actually, we instituted at the corporate level, so at our main office, those who are corporate staff members, to take a day off. So we started that, I think, in July, and every quarter we do a day on Huntington at least. And we try and do blackout periods so there are no meetings, just to sort of step back a little bit. But, the darkest hour, there were a lot of dark hours. I'm very thankful for my husband and my family and even God. You have to believe in something. It could be whatever it is, but you need to believe that it's going to work out. And that sense of belief and that sense of hope is so intangible, but so important and critical to making sure that whatever needs to happen happens. And I think because I was so focused and I dedicated myself 24/7 to making sure it worked, that it couldn't not work. It wasn't even in my vocabulary or my lexicon. So I think with that focus and having the goals and communicating, I mean, we had to, because prior to COVID, we were all brick and mortar, which means in franchising everything, there are manuals and there's a prescription and there's a way to do things. So we really fast had to create trainings for thousands of people to make sure that they did it the Huntington way. We had to create collateral and marketing and commercials and made sure that the public, our consumer, knew that they could come to us, that we weren't just brick and mortar. So there were a lot of facets, and we have really great teams, and we made sure we focused. We reallocated budgets accordingly to think if it is doomsday and X happens, that's not good. How are we going to survive? And if Y happens, how do we survive? So a lot of modeling in terms of what things looked like. And, we did get a few things wrong, and we stepped back and said, okay, how do we fix it? And we have really great councils and boards, and we have a really great community of franchisees. And at one point, I was having basically a listening tour where I was listening to all the franchisees going through, what does online tutoring look like? And we had it as an amendment, so it's not part of your franchise agreement. Some of our competition has actually made it part of their actual agreements. Because we're still in COVID and we're really listening to our franchise community, we want to make sure we get input from everyone. So we're listening even today to make sure that what we decide today is going to positively impact the full-on system. So at the end of the day, yes, there were some dark hours for me personally. That said, I stepped away and I made sure that I was as grounded as possible. I removed the noise. I kept focusing on the facts that I had in front of me. And if a fact changed, then we would talk about it. I would talk about it and say, look, now we have new information. We're going to change what we did because of X, Y, and Z. We're all adults. We're all business owners. So it's really important to be as rational as possible and as grounded as possible in a moment where there's so much misinformation and so much confusion. The key was being clear and being as grounded as possible.
You've mentioned communication, and in a role where you're communicating to your staff, to your customers, to your franchises, there's a lot of layers there. Communication is hard. We actually just had an executive roundtable with Ellevate, and this was the topic, right? How to communicate with authority. And I'm curious, what is your approach? What are the ways in which you're able to communicate all this information? I mean, you're sending daily updates and talking about change. Were there lessons learned about how to best communicate with these stakeholders, especially during a time when there was so much noise? Early days of pandemic, I just feel like I somehow got on everyone's email list and everyone's, and there was just so much noise that it felt overwhelming. How did you cut through the noise to make sure that your customers, your team, your franchises knew you were there, you were listening, you were creating change and supporting?
How we did it was we stuck to our mission. And I think that's why when there was a gas crisis many, many decades ago, when there was the Great Recession, when all the different issues that have happened over our 4 decades of being a business, we always come out stronger. So with the pandemic, because there was so much noise, we had to be extremely succinct. That's internally, so when speaking with franchisees in our internal Huntington community, and externally. Families need to know we are there. So from marketing, it's making sure, what is that message? How do we make sure that parents know that there is a crisis in education right now and they need help? How do we break through that clutter? How do we make sure that the schools know that we are a partner and we can help you and we can make sure that your students don't fall behind? So we had to make sure we understood who our audience was and what was the appropriate tone. So if I'm talking to my best friend, I might have a very different tone than if I was talking in a boardroom. That said, Anne, me, who I am, I'm the same person. So it's making sure that that voice, that sincerity, that integrity, and who the person is true. That authenticity, I think, is key. And I think over the past year and a half, folks in any place, be it personally or professionally, have smelled when something isn't authentic. And I think that's, as a leader and speaking and communicating and as a team, it's important to say, if you don't know something, you say, look, this is a great idea. Let me gather the information and then get back to you. So it's also making sure that you're as honest and transparent as possible. And if I don't know something or my colleagues don't know something, it's who are the experts that do? How do we get them in that room? How do we collaborate with them and make sure that we have a solution ASAP? So the lessons learned, I mean, there are so many lessons learned. We're going to need another podcast, Kristy, but it's truly being authentic. It's making sure that there's a goal, there's a focus, it's succinct, so it's very clear, and that you're solving a problem. Just to speak or have a soapbox doesn't really do anything. We don't have enough time for that. And I'm extremely sensitive in terms of time because we just don't have enough time to accomplish everything we want to accomplish. And so it's how do you, in that moment where you have mom who might be making breakfast for the family and she overhears a Huntington Learning Center commercial, or she's throwing out the mail and she sees a direct mail, or it's a franchisee who is speaking with a local community member. How do you make sure in that moment in time that whoever the audience is knows that Huntington is here, Huntington can help, we're a trusted provider, we're a professional provider, and we understand the importance of your child, your education. If it's a franchisee, we understand the importance of the franchisee. So each leader has to be themselves. You can't be a robot per se. You have to make sure that your own identity shines through and you have the right audience and you know your audience.
Such great advice. Well, I wanted to move on to a little lightning round to learn a little bit more about you as an individual. And are you an introvert or an extrovert?
Oh, well, I'm a Gemini, so I'm both. I'm an extrovert, though I can be introverted. So I'm an extrovert.
What's your favorite day of the week?
Saturday is a good day.
Are you an early bird or a night owl?
Depends how much sleep I've gotten, right? So I would say more a night owl, though.
Who would be your dream dinner guest?
Oh my gosh. Well, that's tough. If it's living or dead, living, I would be very curious about Peter Thiel.
That's a good one. Do you have any pet peeves?
Cell phones when hanging out with people, especially at dinner.
Yeah, I saw a great little, I don't know, it's not a meme, but something about like going to college in the 90s was better than today. And it was like, you had to make plans before you went out and no one had cell phones and they weren't like at a bar on a cell phone. They were just, you had to be present with each other. And I try and tell my kids that all the time about no phones.
That's a whole other conversation. Yes, it's very important to be present.
Do you have a morning must-have to get your day started off on the right foot?
It's not every must-have every day, but I usually spend about 10 to 20 minutes meditating. I have this great app called Mindset Timer. And so I try and meditate for 10 to 20 minutes before I kick in.
What is a favorite recent read?
There's a Peggy Guggenheim book. It's a book about her life that I recently read, which was really, really good.
Do you have a top self-care practice?
Baths.
Nice. And anything, final thought you want to leave with our listeners here today?
Anything truly is possible. It requires grit. It requires perseverance. It requires the right timing. You might be too soon, but don't give up because as we've seen over the past year, anything can come our way. So really anything truly is possible.
Thank you so much for joining us today on the Ellevate podcast.
Thank you for having me. This was excellent.
Thanks so much for listening to Ellevate. If you like what you hear, help a girl out. Subscribe to the Ellevate podcast on iTunes, give us 5 stars, and share your review. Also, don't forget to follow us on Twitter at EllevateNTWK, that's Ellevate Network, and become a member. You can learn all about membership and all the great things that Ellevate Network is doing at our website, www.ellevatenetwork.com. That's ELLEVATE network.com. And special thanks to our producer, Catherine Heller. She rocks. And to our voiceover artist, Rachel Griesinger. Thanks so much, and join us next week.
92% of households that start the year with Peloton are still active a year later.
92% because of a bike?
Not just bikes. We also make treadmills and rowers.
Oh, let me guess, for elite athletes only, right?
Nope. It doesn't matter if you're an avid exerciser or new to working out. Peloton can help you achieve your fitness goals. 92% stick with it. So can you. Try Peloton bikes, tread, or row risk-free with a 30-day home trial. New members only. Not available in remote locations. See additional terms at onepeloton.com/home-trial.